Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us from all across the country. The Public-Private Strategies Institute team wants to say thank you to so many of you for joining us. And we also want to say what a pleasure it's been to partner with the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Biden-Harris administration on this set of educational webinars. All of us on this call firmly believe that small business owners are the backbone of our economy. We believe that you are the heart of our communities. And we know how tough it has been to survive this perilous situation with COVID-19. Fortunately, President Biden has made a big announcement last week that we think takes some steps that will really help small business owners and self-employed folks around the country. And so today we're excited to bring this educational opportunity to you to hear more about that and to be able to, of course, take some of your question and answer. We again want to thank everyone so much for joining us. We want to thank all of our partners. We've had lots of our National Small Business Association partners join us throughout the week. We also will be having one more webinar tomorrow to kick off this series to make sure that we reach as many people as possible. With that, I want to turn the call over to a colleague and friend at the U.S. Small Business Administration to kick off this session. With that, I'll turn the conversation over to Han. Han, over to you.
Thank you, Rhett, and thank you for your incredible leadership, your partnership with the SBA, and everything else that you and your team do to lift up working people and small businesses everywhere. And good afternoon, everyone else. My name is Han. I am the Deputy Associate Administrator at the Office of Communications and Public Liaison. I'm so thrilled to see all of you here. I know you're all really eager to get your questions answered. First, I want you to know that you have the full commitment of the White House and the U.S. Small Business Administration to support every small business in every community, no matter which zip code you live in. And second, we know people are very frustrated with some aspects of the program, but we are working behind the scenes, working night and day to make sure that we serve you the best that we can. I'm excited to kick it over to Patrick in a little bit. But before that, I wanted to say one thing about the news of the hour, and that's President Biden's historic American Rescue Plan. It's a $1.9 trillion plan that just passed in the Senate and will make huge changes and really help working people and families build a bridge toward economic recovery. What this means in a nutshell, once all is said and done, is that there'll be $1,400 checks. These are direct payments to working folks, $14 billion for vaccine distribution, $15 billion in grants to the hardest hit small businesses, and $12 billion in grants for small restaurants that have lost substantial revenue, and much, much more. And the fact of the matter is, working people are hurting everywhere. And this is the most significant economic relief package to benefit working and middle-class families in American history. And it will boost vital programs just like PPP. Speaking of which, I'm going to hand over to Patrick Kelly, the Associate Administrator for the Office of Capital Access at the U.S. Small Business Administration, and also Mark Madrid, who is the Associate Administrator of the Office of Economic Development at SBA. Thanks so much for having me. Over to Mark and Patrick.
Thanks, Han. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for being on this webinar to learn more about the PPP. As Han spoke about, my office is in charge of the Paycheck Protection Program, and I'm excited to get a chance to tell you more about how we're leveling the playing field so that the smallest of small businesses can get relief. My goal is to help our small business communities and put them back on the path of opportunity, enhancing equity for all small business owners. Too many small businesses are being left out of the recovery, so the Biden-Harris administration is making this our top priority. First, here's where we are right now with this round of PPP, some highlights. The share of funding to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees is up nearly 60%. The share of funding going to small businesses in rural areas is up nearly 30%. And the share of funding being distributed by new lenders to SBA community development financial institutions, and minority deposit institutions is up more than 40%. This is good progress, but obviously we know the work doesn't stop here. There's much to do to help businesses that are falling behind. So that's why last week, President Biden made significant changes to the PPP to ensure that the small businesses, what President Biden refers to as the mom and pop businesses that need the most help, have the most access to it. So here's what we're doing. We are allowing sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals to receive more financial support by revising the PPP's funding formula for these categories of applicants. So today, during the Q&A, we'll get into gross income versus net income and how that benefit will work with first draws and second draws. President Biden eliminated an exclusionary restriction on PPP access for small business owners with prior non-fraud felony convictions. And this is consistent with bipartisan congressional proposals. It eliminated PPP access restrictions on small business owners who have struggled to make student loan payments by eliminating student loan debt delinquency as a disqualifier. And it ensures access for non-citizen small business owners who are lawful U.S. residents by clarifying that they may use individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN, to apply for PPP. With that, I'll pause there and hand it back over to Renee for Mark and I to help with your questions.
Thanks so much, Patrick. And welcome, Mark. So happy to have you both here today. There are a ton of questions here, and we're going to try to get our way through as many as possible. And as Stefan mentioned earlier on the onset of this discussion, we are not going to answer specific questions. We know that many of you are facing a lot of issues and are trying to find out how to get those questions answered. So what we're going to try to do is go through these questions and see how we can answer as many that are similar as possible. Want to start first with, and this is to either you, Mark, or Patrick. What is the difference between the PPP and IDLE?
Sure. So I'll take that, Mark, and you clean it up if I don't nail it. So first off, IDLE advances and IDLE loans are a great resource, and at a high level, you need to know that you can avail yourself of all three of these options. So you can use the PPP loan and use the IDLE programs. The IDLE advance is a $10,000 grant. So it is not a loan, and you apply directly through the SBA. The IDLE loan is a loan. It has to be paid back over 30 years. It has a slightly higher interest rate than the PPP loan, so it's kind of north of 2%. But again, it's paid back over 30 years. There are no personal guarantees currently for that loan product. It is currently capped at $150,000, although we are contemplating lifting that cap as well. And then the PPP loan is a loan that is supposed to be forgiven. So we'll get into forgiveness, but it is a loan that 5.2 million different borrowers took a loan out in 2020. You now can seek a second draw or a first draw if you didn't get it in 2020. We'll talk about the changes today. And just as a good piece of data right up the top here about a loan that is forgiven, these are being forgiven. So a third of those 5.2 million PPP loans have applied for forgiveness, and 99.1% of them have received full forgiveness. So Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or clean anything up.
Oh, Patrick, great job. Mark Madrid, thank you first and foremost, small business owners across the U.S. and Puerto Rico, for joining us on a Saturday, persisting on a Saturday. You might be in your virtual living rooms or kitchens or in the car. You might be picking up your kids, or so whatever you're doing, thank you for investing precious time with us. And so what I'd say, Patrick, in addition to, and you did a great job of explaining that, is the bottom line is that you might definitely be eligible for all three of these situations. The first being the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, the IDLE loan, and also an IDLE grant. And so you see a beautiful website here. I say beautiful because it can point you toward a lot of resources. And I know we're going to talk about that later, probably, Renee, but it's the sba.gov/local-assistance. And we'll put that in a URL for you. I would say, please put this in your favorites. And I serve as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development. And we oversee SBA's technical resource arm across the country. And that means supporting small business development centers, women's business centers, and SCORE chapters, which are mentors across the country. But this website can also point you toward our Sba District Offices. And all this means is that in addition to the lender or the capital provider that you're working through, you have an additional resource. When you go to this website, you can also type in your zip code. And I did this a little while ago. I know I can do this, but just to triple confirm, I went in and typed in my zip code, and I got a cadre of several options. And all that means is tools and resources for you. I will end with just because it matters, right? When you can hear of another small business owner. A couple of months ago, I had a small business owner call me, and he was confused, frankly, between qualifying for PPP and IDLE. He had already submitted and been approved for a PPP financing. And so I literally had to because I know you can relate to this. He was multitasking. He was taking care of his 3 kids. He was also cooking, but he was curious about, working capital for his business. So once I explained that he could go to SBA and apply for an IDLE loan, it was like a light shone in his head. And he came back probably 3 days later and said that he had been approved for an IDLE loan in addition to PPP. So if there's a takeaway, is that know that there's a difference between PPP and IDLE. PPP is this financing that will be eligible for forgiveness. And then the IDLE is a loan product. Thank you.
Thank you both for that. Right now, lots of people wondering, when is the deadline? Some people are saying, is March 9th the deadline, March 31st? Is there an extension? There's a new package that was passed in the Senate. So is that extending it to March 31st? Are you guys able to kind of clear up what the March 9th date is and what the March 31st date is?
Yeah, sure. So first off, President Biden and the administration, certainly now and as we move forward, is going to look at every opportunity to focus around how these policies are they accessible? Are they equitable? And with that eye, President Biden announced last Monday that there would be a 14-day exclusive period where businesses with 20 or fewer employees, what he characterizes as mom and pop small businesses, the smallest of the small businesses, so self-employed individuals, independent contractors, sole proprietors, and businesses with less than 20 employees would have exclusive access to work through their lending intermediaries to obtain PPP second draw or first draw. So that period ends, as Renee pointed out, that's the first deadline, March 9th. But if you wake up March 10th and you, were doing whatever you were doing, to Mark's point, you were multitasking for 14 days, fear not, you will not miss out on the first draw or the second draw. You are still able, as a business less than 20 employees, to apply for the remainder of the program duration. But as Renee said, March 31st is the date where the program, this round of PPP first draw, second draw, is set to sunset. I don't believe that the Senate version or the House version of the American Rescue Act, the ARP, includes an extension of the March 31st deadline, although this is happening in real time. But I can tell you that there are discussions with bipartisan support to find a way to extend it beyond March 31st. And I can tell you that Mark and I at the SBA and the SBA leadership are working hard on a path that, if it's not extended, that will enable folks, enable lending intermediaries to disperse after up to 60 days after obtaining SBA loan authorization. And that's a little bit of inside baseball for your lenders. But what it can mean is if you want to take a first draw because you did not get a PPP loan in 2020, you would typically have to wait 8 weeks, demonstrate that you've used those proceeds to apply for your second draw. And so obviously it's March 6th today. So 8 weeks from now will be April. So one of the things we're working on is you can apply for, ahead of the March 31st deadline, your second draw, and the lender will disperse the funds post March 31st to you once you have demonstrated that 8-week period on your first draw. So if you're following me at home, which you may not because that's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, it means that we are trying to help you take advantage of the new rules that came into effect this past week beyond that March 31st deadline, even if we can't get a statutory relief.
Okay, so that was a lot, and I think we're going to probably have little pieces of additional questions that go to that, which I think this one relates to. Someone, and I'm pretty sure this relates to quite a few people, received first round funding of the PPP, but it wasn't enough money, right?
Yep.
Are they eligible to do another PPP this round?
Yeah. So if you received your so we'll take it in two parts. So if you received your first draw PPP loan in 2020, you are you've already used you've used the proceeds in that 8-week period. Clearly, it's just a year later. But in order to qualify for a second draw, you need to demonstrate that you have a 25% reduction in your sales comparing one fiscal quarter in 2020 with this similar fiscal quarter in 2019. So if your sales declined by greater than 25%, comparing one quarter in 2020 to that same quarter in 2019, you can qualify for a second draw. If you received your first draw PPP loan recently during this new round, you need to wait for 8 weeks before to demonstrate that you've used the proceeds before you apply for a second draw, in which case the same rules for the second draw apply, which is you'll need to demonstrate on the second draw that a fiscal quarter in 2020 experienced a decline in sales of 25% or greater versus that similar quarter in 2019. And I should say, Renee, that the rule changes around gross income that make it more likely than not that a self-employed individual, sole proprietor, independent contractor who applied for a PPP loan prior to this rule, they needed to base their calculation based on net income from their Schedule C 2019. President Biden recognized that that was insufficient in terms of relief, and so we have now changed the formula to be calculated with gross income. And while you will not be able to go back in time and redo that, you will be able to, through your second draw, to be able to use the new formula. And if you did not take a PPP in 2020, you can avail yourself of this new rule right now.
So basically you're saying you could use gross instead of net.
Correct. And so, for example, Mark touched upon, we get inquiries from actual, borrowers that are dealing with their situation. This person had a PPP loan in 2020 that under the net income calculation, they qualified for $6,000, and now under the gross, they'll qualify for $16,000.
Huge difference.
Yep, correct.
So with that, because now that's putting people in a whole nother scale of thinking about forgiveness. And I'm seeing all kinds of questions about forgiveness. and how that works. Do you
Yeah.
mind kind of like explaining what are the rules behind forgiveness and how one applies for it?
Yeah. So, so first off, I just want to reiterate that a third of the PPP loans that were dispersed have applied for forgiveness, which is a decent amount of the 5.2 million, and 99.1% of those applications received full forgiveness. Okay, so you need to understand that Congress, the executive branch, your lender want you to be forgiven. So we're all aligned on that. So the general rule of thumb on forgiveness is that you need to demonstrate that 60% of your loan proceeds went towards payroll, hence the name Payroll Protection Program. But 40% can go to other eligible business purposes, such as utilities, rent, those type of things. And provided, so that's the general rule of thumb for forgiveness. As I mentioned, a third of the 5.2 million outstanding PPP loans have applied for forgiveness, and 99.1% have received full forgiveness. So in addition, at the beginning of the calendar year, over the holiday, a law was passed that simplified the forgiveness application for PPP loans from 150,000 and under. And so it's a one-page form application. 80% of those 5.2 million loans are in fact under 150,000. So this should impact a lot of your callers, but it's a simplified process that depends on attestations that you can work with your lending intermediary to execute. In addition, we also cleaned up issues with respect to forgiveness from those loans was going to be taxed as income. It no longer will. And maybe Mark can touch on just the EIDL advances related to forgiveness.
Well, yes. Well, Patrick, thank you for that. What I'd like to say is, I was talking to a small business owner just moments ago, frankly. It's somebody that's going to take care of my pet and watch my pet for a couple of days. And we just started talking. And so she's a dog sitter. And she said, so she asked me what I did. And so I told her, and she said, can I ask you a question? It's a big weight on my shoulder for forgiveness for my first round of PPP. But I've tried to see if I can get that, but I'm unclear. And so I rattled off the stats that we're rattling off today. About over 99% of those who applied for forgiveness have been granted forgiveness. And so, you know, small business owners, we know this is a difficult time, challenging time. We're not in your shoes, but just throwing some empathy there. People are in email jail. And so I just on the spot said, let's be proactive. And I suggested you're proactive with your lender. And by the time she walked out, she had direction on this easy, the form EZ for forgiveness for amounts less than 150,000. So for her, it was a huge lift off. She was feeling the weight on her shoulders, and she's in this round of PPP second draw. So it was a confidence booster that she could go through this process and then set herself up for the process down the road for the forgiveness of the second draw. So I think the bottom line is to be proactive. We hope you hear those percentages, that it could be an influence to you, an encouragement to you, that if for whatever reason that you haven't applied for forgiveness, that these gives you the influential factors for you to be proactive with your capital provider. Or also, if you've been in the process of applying for forgiveness, hopefully that this weekend, today, maybe after this webinar, or tomorrow before you start the business week, we all know that this 7-day-a-week job for you all, that you can take that step in that direction. But Patrick, I know you had some tax implications. That's always an important factor when you're talking about the IDLE grant and how that impacts funding amounts with PPP, et cetera.
Yes, thanks, Mark. So just to recap on forgiveness. So Your idle advance will no longer be deducted from your forgiveness amount, which was a key change at the beginning of this year. And your forgiveness, the forgiveness of the loan will not be taxed as federal income. Although, depending on where you live, your state may still tax that as income. So, the other thing that I want to say about forgiveness that relates to taxes is that you probably work through a CPA to file your business taxes or even your personal returns. And CPAs have been instrumental and at the center of facilitating all those forgiveness applications. So I would encourage you to consult with your CPA about your forgiveness situation, similar to the way you do your taxes. Additionally, third-party payroll providers, so ADP, Paychecks, Gusto, and others are also available and can help you navigate the PPP forgiveness process. So if your PPP loan is not 100% forgiven, there is a fixed interest rate of 1% that's non-compounding, non-adjustable, as you see on the screen. So you do have 5 years to make those principal and interest payments at that point. But again, the idea behind the PPP loan was for it to be forgiven, and so you should seek forgiveness through your lending intermediary.
I'd also like to add right quick that you all will get a recording of this session. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a lot of recordings in my inbox, but I would put a star by this one if you need to go back, when you receive this, or jot down the minute that you heard something that applies to you and go back to it with your recording. So just a couple of tips here to help you. And I just share the sentiments that Patrick relays. We're leaders of departments at the SBA, but we're working together all on your behalf.
Great.
Yes, great point. And we definitely are going to make sure that this is posted. Seeing questions about credit. How is credit for PPP process, authorized, judged, approved? Can you guys talk about how people are approved for PPP loans?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So and it'll have a little bit of context. So by definition, the last 12 months have not been easy for us personally or as business owners. And from the business standpoint, you are probably in a position where your credit looked better heading into 2020 than it did heading into 2021. And that is, normal for an emergency situation like we're dealing with. So the PPP program, or the Paycheck Protection Program loan, does not require any credit scoring. It doesn't require any traditional minimal, personal guarantees or pledging collateral. It doesn't require the lender to underwrite what they use is a debt service coverage ratio to calculate how much principal and interest you have to make on each month. It doesn't have high interest rates. It's a 1% interest rate. So it was designed as a loan that will be forgiven as well. So now, that said, there are lenders who are to take on new customers. So customers that they don't have a pre-existing relationship with through a deposit account, a CD, another loan, for example, that as a precautionary measure, they may be, as an organization, deploying credit scores as a requirement at their institution. And so you may be fine with that, and that's okay, and that's their choice as an organization. However, as I said, it is not a requirement by Congress or the SBA. And if you don't navigate that, or you don't accept that, there are over 5,000 participating lenders that are deploying this standardized product. So all 5,000 of those lenders are giving you the exact same thing. It's a little bit like Girl Scout cookies. Whether you buy Girl Scout cookies in Connecticut or Texas, where it marks from, the mint cookies, the same cookie. You get the same exact one. So you can go to another lender who may not be taking that approach, and in order to kind of figure out, like, so the next question that will come up, well, what if I go to my lender and they don't want to help me? Then I go to another lender, and how will I find a lender? And so to Mark's earlier point, there is Google, where you can find multiple lenders participating in the PPP. There are the local assistance partners that you can find through the website, sba.gov, local hyphen assistance. But again, you don't have to accept it, but that might be a choice that organization's making. But the intent of this program, again, is for it not to be credit scored or underwritten like a traditional loan.
Thanks so much. The pauses that you hear from me are because I'm literally reading all of the chats, and there's someone I just want to put this out there. I'm reading, it's an anonymous attendee. I just want to put it out there. I'm not ignoring you. You put my name out there. I'm not ignoring you. You just have a very, very, very unique, specific question that we unfortunately have said that we cannot address specific questions. So I'm so sorry. We just can't address that. Want to go to more of what I'm seeing, though, in the independent contractors, and talking about how the new rules are impacting independent contractors. Are you kind of able to break down how these new rules impact them in their applications?
Yeah. Yep. Sure. So, broadly, independent contractors apply for and receive the funding through the same intermediary network, and they are open to forgiveness in the exact way that all entities are. However, President Biden last week put forth a rule that took effect this past Wednesday, March 3rd, and lenders began implementing and making loans on Friday. And so Friday morning, they made 4,500 loans with this new gross income calculation rule. And so what has changed is Paycheck Protection Program had a limitation when it was originally rolled out, which is to say it almost implicitly or explicitly wanted you to be a multi-employee small business, okay? That was not exactly the intent, but that was the effect. And so self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, and independent contractors who did not have a payroll, they don't have employees to pay, right? Were frustrated by the calculation methodology, which required you to submit to that lending intermediary, so certified development financial institution, community bank, credit union, financial technology lender, et cetera. You'd have to submit your Schedule C 2019, and then your calculation was based on net income not to exceed $20,833, I think, or something to that effect. And but the problem is, if your 2019 number was not significant, then you really weren't eligible for much relief. And so, as I mentioned earlier in my example, one borrower who I was speaking with this week could only get $6,000 in 2020 on their PPP loan calculation, and as an independent contractor, due to net income. But in 2021, in their second draw, they're eligible for $16,000 now due to the new gross income calculation. So, and this brings me to the next question that I'm sure people are probably asking you, Renee, but like, I already applied, is this retroactive? Can I go back? So if you've applied and your second draw or your first draw has not, funds have not been dispersed, so you did not get the money from that in your account, but you can request from your lending intermediary to withdraw that application, and then apply again with the new calculation for them to obtain SBA loan authorization to disperse you what may be a higher amount under the new calculation.
Thank you for that. what is considered as payroll for a sole proprietor?
So it's a great question. So there's also other entities, S Corps, there's all different organization structures with small businesses. So first, just at a top line, SBA.gov and USTreasury.gov have the ability to calculate. They have calculator tools based on your organization structure to figure out exactly how much you are eligible for. In addition, to Mark's point about double, triple checking the zip code on local assistance, I too have gone to Google, for example, and typed in literally that question and questions like it. So S Corps is another example. And you will find blogs from lenders, blogs from CPAs, so forth, that are handling those type of organizational structure questions and what documentation is needed in order to document your version of payroll. At a broad level, without knowing more, the way that wages are determined for you as an independent contractor or sole proprietor with no employees is predicated upon your Schedule C 2019 gross income now. Or if you do pay yourself a reasonable wage, you can document that with how you disperse those funds into your business account as well. If you do take, pay yourself a weekly, biweekly wage as opposed to distributions. So it gets complicated from there, which is why if you typically work with a CPA to file your taxes, your CPA will be all over how to do this as well, just as an example of a resource.
Can you talk more about the community partners and organizations that exist that can assist people with completing applications and getting through the process?
Sure. Mark, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. And so I do want to underscore the appreciation for the resource partners that the Office of Entrepreneurial Development oversees. And those are the Small Business Development Centers, or you might hear SBDCs, the Women's Business Centers, or WBCs, and SCORE chapters, which are mentors. And so those are available as resource partners to you in a specific area. And you can go to this website, sba.gov/local-assistance to see which one of those centers is closest to you. And you can do that by a zip code search. There's also the Sba District Offices. So shout out to the Office of Field Operations that we work very closely with. That is an additional resource for you. What I would say as well, though, is that one of the things that we've seen is having a relationship with your lender, whatever that is very, very important in terms of keeping updated on your specific case. And so I can only imagine that you have questions related to your specific case. And what we pledge here is that as more information starts coming about with the form, specifically with the newest enhancements that we had to make this more accessible in terms of PPP, will be flowing from this office to our resource partners, which are the Small Business Development Centers, the Women's Business Centers, and the SCORE chapters. They, in turn, will be having that information ready for you as well. I also want to plug it's not part officially of our office, but also the Veterans Business Outreach Centers are also available for the veterans across this country. So I hope that helps out, Renee. What I would do is make sure that you go to this website. And also, if you forget for whatever reason, you can go to sba.gov. But instead of just relaying the website to you, because I know how that can be sometimes, especially when you're dealing with so much pressure and running a business, just take a moment to scroll down the page. You'll also find some information. You might have some questions about the shuttered venues, opportunity. And there has just been a release of information, a bulletin on that was issued just yesterday. But if you just go to sba.gov, you'll see the most recent activity related to any announcements that you can also take back to your lender or your capital provider. I find that knowledge is power. And so we hope that we've provided you with some knowledge that can help you.
Thanks so much, Mark. There are a ton of questions. You guys have so many questions, and I think rightfully so, because that just shows so much about what's happening in different situations for so many small businesses. So we're going to keep the show going. So many people are asking about what time of year dictates when they're eligible for PPP. And then on top of that, showing the 25% decrease or decline in sales. So want to see if we can break those two things down. Like, what is the threshold of date that is started for people to be eligible for the PPP loan? And then also the threshold of the 25% of sales declining.
Yeah, so I'll take the second part first. In order to qualify for a second draw PPP loan, you need to demonstrate that one fiscal quarter in 2020 versus the same fiscal quarter in 2019 evidences a decline in revenue greater than 25%. So that's the first part. The second, the first part of your question, my second answer is you needed to be in business on or before, February 15th, 2020. And I recognize that there are businesses that may have started beyond, it's a year later, effectively or over a year later from February 15th. And so you're saying, well, I started my business after that date, but it's been a year and it's been a tough year. Whether this is right or wrong, the policy decision was to put a line in the sand that said, if you're going to start a business after a certain date, when you were building your business plan, when you were contemplating the economic situation you were in to start your business, you were fully aware of the headwinds that were in place. And we can debate that, and I recognize that it's not as simple as that. But the logic, if you're following this line drawing, is that if you started a business before that date, you didn't have that opportunity. No one could foresee that the pandemic was going to hit the scene, and therefore you are eligible for relief. And so that is how this emergency program has been operating. And again, there's always with public policy edge cases and problems with line drawing, but this is one of those. That I'm just giving you the context for why that was decided the way it was.
No, appreciate that. Getting a lot of questions again about the usage of PPP funds. Can people use funds for business insurance, operating expenditures? Want to know if you can break that down again.
There's So you can use PPP proceeds for eligible business purposes related to those type of things that you identified that are expenses. So utilities, insurance, rent, those are types of things that you can use them for. Remember, there's a limitation in the forgiveness calculation. So only 40% of those non-payroll expenses that are eligible, like rent and utilities and so forth, can qualify as an eligible use towards your 60% versus 40% forgiveness application or forgiveness calculation. That said, this program was the Paycheck Protection Program, and so it was designed to address working capital primarily related to payroll and wages. It was an emergency program, and as we move, thankfully, through the spring, as the vaccines come online, as the policies of wearing masks, social distancing, and so forth continue to take positive impact, we will move into a period of recovery, and there will be growth opportunities for your business and you may be in a position to take advantage of those, whether it's thinking about owner-occupied real estate, business acquisition, additional working capital for growth. And those are all areas where the standard 7A portfolio of product offerings may be applicable to you. So on the small dollar side, and I'll maybe let Mark talk a little bit about microlending in a second, but there's a microloan program where lending intermediaries can originate loans up to 50,000, and Mark can probably talk about some that he's familiar with. And then I'll just touch on, and there's the 504 program for owner-occupied real estate where you can get a fixed rate loan for up to 20 to 25 years. There's business acquisition financing in the SBA's 7A program. And these products have long maturities, which lowers the amount of payment that you have to make each month in the form of principal and interest, capped interest rates, no covenants. You can qualify in the case of a business acquisition loan or working capital without pledging fixed assets. And so these are really good tools. And, year in, year out, close to north of 25 billion of loans are originated across the 7A footprint and are available to businesses. And I should point out that a substantial percentage of those loans go to minority firms, women-owned firms, veteran-owned firms, low to moderate income areas, et cetera. So, but I'll let Mark just touch a little bit on the microloan and just that type of provider network that's out there.
Thank you, Patrick. I also want to address the microloans, but also I feel like having a reiteration of the am I eligible for the second draw? I am going to send a URL here that you can have the URL, the website address directly, so that you can, if you need further clarification on the 25% rule, the quarter-to-quarter comparison, that you can find it on this particular webpage. Yes, there is a microloan opportunity that I will also supply a direct website address for this if you're interested in this particular product that could help with immediate working capital if you qualify. So I think it's important to understand the eligibility of everything that we're talking about. I know it's a lot of information coming to you, but the microloan, the average microloan that is deployed in this manner is, just so you know, is about $13,000. It does have its own lending and credit requirements. So generally the intermediaries require some type of collateral for this particular product, but this can help you with the inventory and supplies. And so they're available through certain nonprofit and community-based organizations. You might have heard us talking about CDFIs, Community Development Institution, financial institutions. So these are also resources that under our administration that are being empowered, meaning the CDFIs and the minority depository institutions. That might be a factor for you as you're trying to get to the road of a bankable product. And so we just want to keep exploring options with you. What I'll do now is I'll make sure that I send a couple of very specific website addresses that can help you both with the microloan product and also with the eligibility of the second draw of PPP if you've secured PPP financing before. I hope that helps out.
I want to do a quick rapid fire because I see there's some that we can really knock out kind of quickly before we end. Can we go further into the student loan information?
Yeah, so there were prior to President Biden's announcement, if you were delinquent on your student debt, you were precluded from moving forward with PPP loans. And so because of his announcement, the new rules do not prevent you from moving forward based on student loan delinquency.
Woo! So
yep.
To those with student loan debt, which is majority of Americans, you can get PPP now. Began my application and the rules came out. Can the bank adjust my loan with the new rules, or do I need to do something?
Say the first part again, Renee. I missed the
Yes.
beginning. Yeah.
Began my application and submitted it, and the rule came out.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I got it now. So if you have a first draw application or a second draw application in flight this round, and you like what you hear today or about the gross income calculation in particular, you can request from your lender to withdraw your application and reapply and request that they recalculate your loan amount using the gross income formula that was again published Wednesday, March 3rd. And again, lenders are starting to process that. I will tell you that there are lenders who are signaling that they have, for whatever reason, made a business decision that they may not be inclined to support new applications in association with this gross income rule change for whatever decision. But again, I want you to understand that there are 5,000 or actually north of 5,000 different entities. So if your particular lender makes a business choice, and while you disagree with it, and I may disagree with it, you can find another lender to process your second draw or your first draw. I would encourage you to do that. And what I would say with this entire process, which I know you're doing, so you're going to say, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. I think you should be, you got to continue to be patient, but persistent with these lending intermediaries. And again, if you don't like their decision, there are over 5,000 of them making this uniform product available.
Patrick, and what I would add to that is having served business owners on the ground for the last decade, something that's also working is we definitely hear what's going wrong, but turn to each other for what's going right. You can learn a lot from each other. There's nothing like peer-to-peer small business owners talking to each other. I've seen it time and time again when one has offered an idea, a suggestion to the other of what's going well, what worked right, what response rates were to their liking, where they had a good experience. I would submit for your consideration that you all, because you all speak the same language of running a small business, that you listen to each other, all of you, no matter if you look the same, if you're in the same type of sector. I would submit that because that's going to go a long way in helping us get to where we need to go. And this is urgent and it's challenging, but if we are in the same direction, we're going to get there.
No truer words have been uttered today. Thank you, Mark. Idle grant. Do you have to request forgiveness or is it automatic?
It's a grant. It's automatic. You don't need to be forgiven and you don't need to pay anything back.
All right. And last one, is the 25% sales a quarter or a combined of 3 quarters? There was a ton of misconceptions on this one.
Yeah, it's any quarter versus a similar quarter. So what you can't do is take, 3 months, kind of take September, marry it up with June and put it together with February and then do the same in 19. You have to take Q1 or Q3 versus Q1 or Q3 2020 to 2019.
Okay, I'll do one more.
Yep.
Can you apply to more than one lender at a time?
Yeah, you can. One of the challenges with that is obviously you've got to submit, materials. It is a similar form. I will tell you, I understand, believe me, I do, the frustration sometimes with banks. I get it. However, as Mark said, sometimes we dwell on the things that are not working, which is, as it should be, because that's how you fix them. We need to remember that banks have done, they have been with you 7 days a week, nights and weekends through this journey, because they are Americans and we're all in this together, as President Biden reminded us on inauguration. So, so be patient, but be persistent with them. And I think, you know, they get it. They sometimes we, you know, banks give us reason to, you know, take a pause. I get it. But, you know, they are trying to do their best too, and they recognize as Americans that they need to help you.
Well, guys, really appreciate the time you share with us this Saturday afternoon. Want to thank all of you small business owners and over the 1,000 questions that you asked today. I am so sorry we could not get to all of them. But I hope that in some of the questions we asked, we addressed some of your questions and help you find some sort of answer to those questions you had today. I want to thank everyone present today, Rhett Buttle, PPI Institute. I want to thank Han Nugent from the SBA, Patrick Kelly from the SBA, Mark Madrid from the SBA. And again, a special thank you to all of you who are small business owners who are trying to thrive during this really difficult time. We know that you are trying to find a road to recovery, and we're here to just be as most supportive as we can. We thank you again, and this is being recorded and will be posted later. It will be emailed too. So again, thank you for sharing your Saturday afternoon with us. Take care. Have a great evening.